So lads, today we're going to be talking about the Indiana Fever after their loss last night against the Golden State Valkyries, and all I'm going to say is that they're in trouble. The Fever are in trouble. Not anything absolutely crazy. It's not like she's going, or it's not like we're done for, or we're not going to make the playoffs. Like, we basically need to lose to the Mystics.
The Indiana Fever just dropped a brutal loss to the Valkyries, and even with Caitlin Clark set to return, the truth is harsh. This team might still be in serious trouble. That loss to the Valkyries wasn't just another mark in the standings, it exposed something deeper. Golden State, an expansion team still finding its identity, outplayed the Fever in every key moment. Indiana looked flat, out of rhythm, and completely unprepared for the intensity of the matchup. The Valkyries didn't just win, they controlled the tempo, forced turnovers, and left Indiana scrambling. For a team fighting for its playoff spot, it was a performance that raised red flags everywhere. Fans expected the Fever to dominate a brand new franchise, but instead, they looked like the inexperienced group. And the scary part? Not even Caitlin Clark's return guarantees that this pattern will suddenly change. On paper, the Fever are still alive and well. ESPN's Basketball Power Index gave them a staggering 97% chance to make the playoffs, which sounds like a lock, but numbers don't always tell the full story. Yes, they'll probably sneak in, but look closer at the breakdown. Their chances of reaching
The problem isn't making the playoffs. The problem is the worst position the Indiana Fever can be in is 8 and get pummeled by the Lynx. Because if the Indiana Fever, because the Connecticut Sun are starting to win a few games, if the Indiana Fever got to 9, they would have the fourth best odds as the number 1 pick. There's a chance that you get, like, this is a 5 or 6 person draft. And the problem is you add 2 expansion teams in, and you go from projected 4th in the draft to 8th as the 8th seed. And the only difference is you got 2 games against the Minnesota Lynx where you got pummeled.
Finals sit at just 12%, and their odds of actually winning the championship drop all the way down to 2%. Those aren't the numbers of a team built for a deep run, they're the numbers of a squad clinging to hope. And that's what makes this so dangerous. When people hear 97% playoff chance, they assume the Fever are safe. But the reality is very different. They might make it in, but once they're there, the road gets brutal. Teams like New York, Las Vegas, and Minnesota are stacked with firepower, depth, and championship experience. Indiana, meanwhile, is banking on one superstar to carry them out of the fire. What makes the situation worse is the timing. The Valkyries exposed the Fever's weaknesses at the exact moment when they needed momentum most. Instead of charging into the final stretch with confidence, they're wobbling. And if they limp into the postseason, that 97% chance won't mean much. Because once the lights get brighter, percentages don't win games, execution does. But that wasn't the only issue hanging over Indiana. Caitlin Clark's return, which should be a rallying cry, comes with more uncertainty than answers. The biggest question mark hovering over Indiana isn't whether they'll sneak into the playoffs, it's what Caitlin Clark's return actually means. On the surface, her comeback should be a game changer, the kind of spark that shifts everything. But here's the truth, nobody knows exactly when she'll be back or how close she'll be to her old self. The team hasn't given a clear timetable, and that silence has only fueled speculation. Some insiders believe she's being rushed. Others suggest the Fever are holding back details because they know expectations will skyrocket the second her name is announced. And that's the problem. The weight on Clark's shoulders isn't just heavy, it's crushing. Every fan, every teammate, and every analyst is waiting for her to walk on the court and fix everything. But basketball doesn't work like that. She can't erase the sloppy turnovers, the lack of discipline, or the breakdowns on defense. And if she struggles in her first games back, the backlash will be immediate. The story will flip from Clark the savior to Clark the disappointment, and that's a dangerous narrative for a young star to face. What makes this even scarier for the Fever is history, because the last time Clark came back, it didn't go the way anyone expected. When Caitlin Clark first returned to the lineup earlier in the season, fans thought it would be the turning point. Instead, it was one of the lowest points of the year. The Fever were blown out by the Valkyries, 80-61. And the gap wasn't just on the scoreboard, it was in effort, energy, and focus. Clark herself struggled to find rhythm, and the team around her looked complete.
Yeah, that team goes and has 23 wins, with the tiebreaker over the Fever. Which means the Fever, to overtake the Valkyries, have to go 3-1. Which is not easy to do because they're almost certainly going to lose to the Mercury tomorrow night. They then face the Sky and the Mystics, which they should win both of those games. Probably Caitlin Clark back for those. And then you go and face the you then face the Lynx in their second last game of the season. So they're not going to take it easy. They have to play the Valks after. They're not going to bench their players in the second last game of the season. They're not going to do that, especially with all the eyes on that game with Fee's MVP case. They're not going to bench those players. They're going to want to beat the Fever by 40 because it's not their last game of the season. They'll rest them the next game. They're not going to start resting them with 3 games to go. I think it's in Minnesota as well, if I'm not mistaken. It might not. Is it in Minnesota? I don't know. But yeah, and then so the Valks, I think there's a near 0 chance we overtake the Valkyries.
Disconnected, almost as if they were waiting for her to carry them instead of playing their roles. What made it worse was how the coaches described the loss afterward. They didn't sugarcoat. When Caitlin Clark was sidelined, many assumed the Fever were doomed to collapse completely. But then came one of the most jaw-dropping comebacks in franchise history. Down by more than 20 points against the powerhouse Connecticut Sun, Indiana looked finished. The crowd was restless, analysts were already writing the headline, and yet the Fever didn't quit. Kelsey Mitchell erupted for a career-high 38 points, and suddenly the energy shifted. Possession after possession, the Fever clawed their way back until, unbelievably, they snatched the win. That night was a reminder that this team isn't entirely defined by Clark's presence. They showed grit, resilience, and the ability to rise up when no one believed in them. Players like Aaliyah Boston and Naylissa Smith stepped into bigger roles, proving they could carry the weight when it mattered most. Fans flooded social media, calling it the most inspiring Fever game of the season, and for a brief moment, the narrative flipped. Maybe, just maybe, this team had more layers than people gave them credit for. But here's the catch. Games like that were flashes, not habits. The Fever proved they could fight, but they haven't been able to string together that kind of toughness consistently. And in a league where every night is a battle, inconsistency is fatal. Which brings us back to the uncomfortable truth. If Indiana can't find that fire every single game, Clark's return won't matter. And some basketball legends are already warning that her comeback might not be worth the risk at all. As excitement builds around Caitlin Clark stepping back onto the floor, not everyone is convinced it's the right move. In fact, some of the biggest voices in women's basketball are sounding the alarm. Hall of Famer Lisa Leslie openly suggested that the Fever should consider shutting Clark down for the season entirely, prioritizing her long-term health over the short-term chase for a playoff spot. Her reasoning was blunt. No single player, no matter how talented, should risk aggravating an injury just to squeeze out a few extra wins in a season that probably won't end.
I think last night's game cemented the Valkyries ahead of the Fever. Because the Fever need to go 3-1 and the Valks need to lose all the games they're meant to lose. You've then got, obviously, you've got the Storm, who the Seattle Storm have got the Sparks, which is a very losable game, the Liberty, the Valks in a tough one. So the Storm have a really, really tough run-in. So they face this, and again, if any of these teams want to win the last game of the season, unless they're playing against another team that needs to win the last game of the season, if you want to win that game, you're going to win that game.
And with the championship anyway. And Leslie isn't alone. Around the league, whispers have grown louder about whether Indiana is pushing Clark too quickly, putting her under impossible pressure to be the savior. Reports claim some insiders fear the team's desperation could backfire, leaving their star exposed and overworked. The Fever are balancing on a tightrope. Fans want wins now, but Clark's future value is worth far more than a single postseason appearance. The bigger issue is psychological. If Clark returns and the team still falls apart, the headlines won't read, "Indiana's struggles continue." They'll read, "Clark couldn't save them." That's the kind of narrative that can stick to a player unfairly, twisting public perception before her career has even hit its prime. So, while the Fever hope her comeback changes everything, the reality is clear. The risks might outweigh the rewards. And as the season races toward its conclusion, that's what makes Indiana's future so uncertain. The Indiana Fever are standing at a crossroads. On one side, they have Caitlin Clark, the generational star whose presence alone fills arenas and ignites hope. On the other, they have a team riddled with inconsistency, struggling to find its identity, and leaning on one player to solve problems that go far beyond her shoulders. The loss to the Valkyries wasn't just a bad night, it was a warning. A warning that, unless this group figures out how to play with urgency...
And so they have only 3 games left. Sorry, it's the Valks, the Liberty. So they don't actually play on the last night of the season. So there's no gimmies there. So these are 3 tough games. These are 3 really tough games. And the hope is that the Storm go 1-2. The hope is that the Storm go 1-2 here. And if the Storm go 1-2, the Storm have 23 wins, but we have the tiebreak. Which means we can go 2-2 for the rest of the year. If we go 2-2, we tie them and we beat them on the tiebreak because we swept them. Going 2-2 is easier said than done. And that's hoping that the Storm lose to the Valks and lose to the Sparks. And if the Storm lose to the Sparks, I think the Storm are in a bit of form. Like, they're 6-4 in their last games. They beat the Minnesota Lynx. This is a team that is built for the playoffs. This is a team that is built for the playoffs. This is a roster that is built for the playoffs. They're built for these type of games. They're built for these one-off games. Skylar Diggins, Gabby Williams, Neka Wumake, Ezzy, Dom Malonga, Erica Wheeler's hooping off the bench. Brittany Sykes, again, they're there. This is a team that's there to win a championship. They're not going to want to fuck about and get the Lynx. They're not going to want to drop to that 9th seed. And I think there might be a world where the 3 teams end on the same record.
Discipline and unity, Clark's return will feel more like a bandage than a cure. Playoff projections might say they're safe, but the numbers can't hide what fans are seeing with their own eyes. This is a team that can shine one night and collapse the next. A team that hasn't yet proven it can go toe-to-toe with the league's giants when the pressure is at its peak. Clark's comeback brings excitement, but also fear that her health could be jeopardized, fear that expectations could crush her, and fear that the Fever are setting themselves up for another heartbreak. The truth is simple. Caitlin Clark may change the story, but she can't write the ending alone. If the Fever want to survive the storm ahead, they'll need more than one superstar. They'll need everyone locked in, playing with fire, and proving they belong. Because if they don't, this season could end not with a triumph, but with the sobering realization that even with their brightest